Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the webinar, which is named Artificial Intelligence Opportunities for Business Cooperation. I'm very pleased to be your host. My name is Piotr Mieszkowski. I'm a Managing Director of Digital Poland Foundation. The webinar is organized by the Embassy of Republic of Poland in the Kingdom of Sweden. And during the webinar, we will address the following topics. First of all, we'll talk about greatest challenges and threats, including roadblocks to the implementation of AI. Then we're going to talk about the future of artificial intelligence with or without the EU regulation, how to foster the data sharing and how to foster infrastructure sharing. And last but not least, we'll talk about cooperation between Poland and Sweden. The agenda is as follows. We will start with the welcome word from Ms. Joanna Hoffman, Ambassador of Poland to Sweden. Then we have two opening speeches, which probably will last no longer than 10 minutes each, from Professor Virginia Dignum and Professor Robert Novak. And after the two keynote speeches, we're going to have a panel discussion with several distinguished guests. I'm going to be the moderator of that panel. So let us start with the welcoming word. So Ms. Joanna Hoffman, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants and guests. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the webinar, during which we will discuss opportunities for business regarding artificial intelligence, as well as its challenges, barriers, risks, and expectations of AI user in Poland and Sweden. Artificial intelligence is considered to be one of the most important factors determining the future of socio-economic development. Artificial intelligence is called by some experts the new electricity that will change all sectors of the economy. Machines are supposed to increase human possibilities, transform the world of business, working methods, communication, and actions. Many countries recognize the role of AI. Therefore, they have developed their own strategies for new information technologies. Poland has also prepared its own AI development policy for 2019-2027. AI is also an important research topic for the Polish scientists. In 2010-2019, Polish researchers took the 6th place in the ranking of the number of published AI-related papers in the EU. But let's start the talk with some numbers. 175 zettabytes is the expected amount of data produced globally in 2025, up from 33 zettabytes in 2018. No human or organization can manage this amount of data themselves. The accessibility of such massive amounts of data and new algorithms have led to major breakthroughs in artificial intelligence. As we know, it creates opportunities for rapid development, but also serious risks. We know from experience that technology explosion most often happen without any regulatory approval. This means that artificial intelligence will be with us whether we like it or not. And it is our duty to use it in a safe, sustainable way and for the benefit of the people. It is important to remember that AI must serve the humanity, not the other way around. When it comes to business, artificial intelligence can enable the development of a new generation of products and services, including sectors where European companies, and in particular Poland and Sweden, are already well established, such as the green and circular economy, machine manufacturing, agriculture, healthcare, or tourism. And the area of digital innovation, Poland and Sweden, both at the level of administration and private companies, should think of each other as natural partners. Cashless economies and digital public services are only the beginning of similarities between our markets. Polish products like Blik in banking or Logic AI in public administration are great success stories. Our market is eager and ready for more, especially in cooperation with Swedish partners. We know that nowadays, the key challenge for the development of artificial intelligence is investment. Only 1.5 billion euro is sourced from European funds to this sector, while the real needs are several times greater. It is necessary to create an investor-friendly regulatory environment. I personally believe that such discussions, like the one which we are about to hear today, may really help influence lawmakers and may build good ground for future cooperation. With deep interest myself, I invite you to hear the panel discussion and share your thoughts on AI market and what we can do to make it better. Thank you and enjoy.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ambassador. Let's now move on to the second speech of our webinar. It will be presented by Professor Ms. Virginia Dignum. She's the Wallenberg Chair Professor, Responsible Artificial Intelligence Program Director at Wahlberg Foundation AI, Autonomous System and Software Program, Humanities and Society, but also at Umeå University Department of Computer Science. Ms. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me today, and I look forward to a good discussion with all of you. Let me just start by sharing my screen. I see it's not possible, so it's not a problem. I can just talk and not sharing slides. That's fine. So when we talk about AI, and I fully address and agree with the words that the ambassador just told before. It is a great opportunity, but it is an opportunity which comes with responsibility. And when we talk about responsibility in AI, and many of us, at many different levels, are increasingly talk about issues of responsibility, accountability, ethics, and the human rights principles associated with AI, the first thing we really need to understand is that AI systems, the AI software as we see it and as we use it nowadays, is and now it seems that the screen can be shared, so let's share the screen. So is it sharing? No? So, yeah. So AI is more than software alone. And the software that we are using, the computational techniques that we are using are, first of all, not artificial, and second, not intelligent. They are not artificial in the sense that the software itself is not possible without the work and efforts of many, those that collect the data, those that tag the data, those that train the algorithms, those that develop, manage, govern, use in many different ways this software, but also is not artificial in the sense that these systems do use a lot of natural resources, both in terms of energy for the computational effort, but also in terms of minerals and other ground matters which are needed to develop the hardware and the components and infrastructures that we need. So AI is not artificial. AI is also not intelligent. It's not intelligence in the sense that we would call a person to be intelligent. These systems, the one, especially the technology that we have been using in the last decade, the one which has been at the center of all this new revival of the AI research, is not intelligent, is not able to understand the meaning of the patterns that are being identified. It is extremely good at identifying patterns in data, but it has really hard difficulties to understand what what those patterns mean and what are the really the concepts and the knowledge behind these patterns. So as we use these systems to take autonomous actions for us, to take decisions and so on, we need to be aware that the system doesn't understand what it's doing, not understand the consequences, not understand the meaning of the aspects that it has been analyzing. But it's also okay, because in what we also cannot forget is that AI is a tool that we develop, not something which is magic and happens to us, is developed by us for a given purpose. And moreover, AI is not alone, is part of a social technical ecosystem involving and including all those that develop, use, govern, monitor, and maintain these type of systems. When we talk about responsible artificial intelligence, we do need to understand this social technical system and address those institutions, organizations, and people alongside the software that is being used and developed. So responsible artificial intelligence is about understanding that AI can potentially do a lot. And yes, we do want to address and utilize and capitalize on this potential, positive potential of what AI can do. But the question at the same time is, should AI be doing what? And who is going to decide? This is really an issue of power, an issue of the imbalance of powers that we are potentially seeing at the moment. Those that have the power to decide when or how to use AI are those that have the power to determine our future and the future of our society. Those that have the power to decide which values to consider are those which are going to shape the AI systems that are going to affect all of us. And this discussion is not all the time sufficiently addressed and sufficiently understood. It's not just about how looking at how can we govern and maintain the data, how can we look at bias and transparency and so on. Is really understanding that those that can, those that have the power are those that are shaping the future. And as Europeans, as countries within Europe, we do need to be part of this discussion. We do need to be part of those that have the ability and opportunity to decide how and when and where AI is going to be used. There are many concerns, and none of us can ignore the concerns that are around. But one of the main concerns is that we are, because of all the potential problems, we are not going to exploit the full potential of AI. We do need to address the negative concerns, but at the same time, we really need to look at these concerns as ways to advance, to change, to improve, and to innovate in this discipline. It's not just about understanding that there is bias, but it's understanding how can AI be done differently in ways that bias is not a concern anymore. It's considering and discussing the cost of using AI, the cost of following the path of improving on accuracy of AI systems forever, and increasing understanding that by improving 0.0001% accuracy on a potential algorithm, with the cost of increasing computational cost by like 20 or 30%, we really need to make choices, and we really need to understand the concept of intelligence by Joule. How much can we develop, how intelligent can we develop systems, how useful can we develop these systems without insupportable cost for our environments. It's also issues of diversity, of explanation, of the lack of diversity and inclusion in those that are developing AI, but I'm not going to repeat. All of us are aware of these concerns. But like I say, one of the main concerns is that we stare too much at the negative problems and don't really see this as potential for developing, and those will potentially limit our potential of using AI in a positive way. So responsible AI is about addressing the legal aspects of AI, the ethical aspects of AI, ensuring that the systems that are used are robust and reliable, are beneficial, but also from a perspective of trust, from a perspective of understanding. We really need to make sure that we can verify that indeed the systems are doing what we say that they are doing. It's easy to say that we want the system to be fair. It's maybe even potentially possible to implement systems to be fair, but how can we verify in unequivocal ways that systems are indeed being fair or being safe or being transparent? It's a much more complex problem. And it's one which is not only computational, because the systems are not only computational. So we really need to address this from a multidisciplinary perspective. So responsible AI is ensuring that we put responsibility where there is autonomy, that we put transparency where there is adaptability, and that we put accountability where there is interaction. All these principles, these criteria are not computational per se, are to be addressed by the organizations, by the institutions, and by the software in different ways. Responsible AI is also understand that it is not against innovation. If anything, all these issues, all these concerns, all this potential needs to be addressed as a stepping stone for innovation. If we cannot do things in a different way, that is just all the good reason to innovate in a different way. If we really want systems to be accurate and computationally efficient, that is not more nor less than a huge research question and huge innovation question for all of us. How can we really take these issues as the stepping stone, as the moving forward for innovation, instead of staring completely at the current possibilities of AI and just seeing AI as a way to easily and use more and more data and manage and store more and more data. So really move forward from the current solutions and see responsibility as a way to innovate better, innovate more, innovate differently. Taking this as a way for business differentiation, a way to support and increase public acceptance, and really see responsibility as a drive for transformation, which at the end will lead to better solutions and to return on investment. And I think that Europe is very well positioned in this direction, and we really need to address AI in a different way and not just follow the so-called race in which the United States and China are potentially involved. Really look forward to different ways to address and to increase innovation within the European ecosystem. There is a lot of work done in responsibility around the world.
Unfortunately, Ms. Professor, we are limited. We have a time limited,
okay,
so we have to stop. So
I was finishing here, so that is fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I mean, very interesting things you said. I mean, that artificial intelligence is neither artificial or intelligent. So we have some topics for further discussion. Let's move on to our next distinguished guest, Mr. Professor Robert Novak. He's the head of Artificial Intelligence Division in Institute of Computer Science at Warsaw University of Technology. Mr. Novak, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning. I totally agree with you that artificial intelligence is not intelligence and not artificial. And I totally agree with Professor Virginia Gingum about the responsibility. So now I would like to share my screen and my background is programming. I'm programmer, I'm engineer, I'm currently scientist at Institute of Computer Science, and I was involved in many projects. And I would like to say again that artificial intelligence and algorithms use electronic computers, and electronic computers are just the fast calculators. They can add numbers, integer numbers, really quickly and have a lot of memory, but there is no mysteries inside this, and artificial intelligent algorithms are even simpler, because if we would like to solve problem using computer, we can develop the algorithm from the scratch or use so-called artificial intelligence or machine learning approach, which means we use some general purpose algorithm which has some parameters, and this algorithm calculate automatically those parameters using some data. And we have results good enough, and in engineering problems, sometimes it's much easier use to artificial intelligence algorithm than the typical algorithm. So the real question, and this question is not from engineers but rather from society, is if a computer should solve a given problem. And if the answer is yes, it means engineers try to find or answer the question if a given problem could be solved by the computer. And I would like to give you two examples from my division. The first is analyzing the financial data. It is the project from car insurance company, and in Poland, such company needs to provide a car replacement if car accident happened for the customer. And this company has two options. At first, give the car, the second, give some financial compensation, some money. And this compensation is cheaper. So we can analyze the data about the car accident, about the place, about the weather forecast, public transport availability, the day, if it is a holiday or not, and so on, and build the model which say what is the probability that the customer decides to get this card or not. And this information help for the staff from company to talk, and maybe this compensation will be bigger. The second example is from biomedical, and is also our project, not commercialized, and it is analyzing the thermal images as well as visual images to find the skin allergy responsibility. Analyzing these images, we built the model which has really high accuracy to find the skin allergy response, and such program help to find the allergy, and it could be used not only by allergist, medical doctor, but by any medical staff who is responsible for putting the allergy for the skin. So, I would like to finish just now, and I think the big issue is the responsibility, and maybe this is the main purpose of this meeting. But from engineering point of view, artificial intelligence is just computer science, and it's nothing special in it, and the responsibility is always on the human side. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Now let's move on to the panel discussion. We have 4 topics, as mentioned. We're going to focus on challenges, threats, the future of artificial intelligence, data sharing, and cooperation between Poland and Sweden. I hope we will manage to cover all the topics because, like I said, we are time constrained till around 10:05. Then we're gonna 11:05. Then we're gonna move on to Q&A session. So together with me in alphabetical order is Damian Ciachorowski, CEO of Gaia Foundation. Gaia goal is to study the ethical challenges and opportunities related to AI tools in order to develop definitions and algorithms of compassionate artificial intelligence through tools that use human creativity and the computing power of artificial intelligence called collective creativity. Good morning, Damian.
Hello.
Then we're going to have Christopher Fredriksson, the founder and CEO of Commended AI, which uses AI and data on consultants' competences to intelligently match assignments with the right individuals. Good morning.
Good morning.
We have also Johan Harvard. He's the director at Combient Group. That's the group which brings together more than 30 Swedish corporations, a number of those corporations together. And these companies carry out projects such as creating platform for improving digital skills, advising on AI, offering cooperation with startups. They all, the corporation, the group was founded in order to speed up the digitalization of those corporations. Previously, Johan was also a deputy director at this, for the Swedish government, responsible for overseeing policy development and advancement in the areas of artificial intelligence and digitalization of industry. Good morning.
Good morning.
We have also Jarosław Królewski, a CEO who runs the very famous and very dynamic company called Synerise, which is one of the AI leaders in data analytics in Poland, or also in AI. Jarosław is also a huge, has huge amount of accolades, but he also supports a sport club called Wisła Kraków, or a local community. Good morning, Jarosław.
Good morning, everyone.
And last but not least, we have Boris Stokowski, who advises on digital transformation thanks to a company called Refink, and support the development of logistic robots in factories through the company called VersaBox. And he is also a volunteer for a number of initiatives, including AI policy in Poland, or he was also a chairman of the biggest IT and telecom chamber called PIT. Good morning, Boris.
Hello, everybody.
Together with us, there should be a Pejman Momeni from Sweden, but unfortunately, he called sick just today in the morning. So we wish him a return to health. I hope he will recover very quickly. So let's move on, dear panelists. So let's move on to the first topic of the discussion, which is the greatest challenges and threats, and including bias in artificial intelligence. It was mentioned by our two distinguished guests at the opening speeches that regulation is not an obstacle, actually. It could be a feature, or it could be an advantage of Europe. But when I talk with startups, I'm specifically underlining this word startups, not corporation. Most of them, want to get rid of the regulation. They are not happy because of GDPR, because of many regulation which comes from Brussels, but actually come from most of the governments which established European Union. So my first question would be whether the regulation is actually the real barrier for startups or corporation. And on the side note, the second one will be, what are the greatest challenges and threats in terms of developing or building AI in Europe versus China or US? Because as you know, US and China are the two leaders in that space. So maybe let's start from Boris Stokowski. What's your take on that? Since you have a good view because of VersaBox and the Refink company.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody, once again, and thank you. Thanks for the distinguished panelists for a great intro. The first is the hardest. Anyway, my take on challenges. I think when we are talking about the challenges, from my perspective, AI is really a part of a broader sea change that we could perhaps call we could call techno-evolution. So it's a technology that changes the way we operate as societies, as economies, also as humans. And I think that the challenge that we are facing today is related to the speed of change, because historically, when we look at techno-evolution, usually for every major cycle of changes in this technosphere, these cycles have been faced by many generations who could basically absorb the change, that had the time to rebuild their social structures, their mental conceptual models, understanding of what are the effects of introducing technology innovations on a large scale have to be taken care of. And I think that the major difference that we are facing today is really the speed, because for every generation that is present today and will be present in the future, we are facing many cycles. So there was one cycle for many generations, and today every generation has to understand and accommodate to many cycles of technology change. And I think AI is sticking out of this whole technological landscape because not just because it's magic. It's obviously not. But I think it's really the emergent behavior of the system built with AI capabilities that are puzzling us today. Because obviously, from the reductionist perspective, I could agree. I mean, computer is just calculator with a lot of storage and maybe very fast processors. But neurons are also fairly simple mechanism. As our wetware, from the reductionist perspective, is also relatively simple mechanism that we can also reflect to some extent in using our digital technologies. And really, what makes the difference is the emergent behavior. So the fact that today the engineered systems are exhibiting some kind of behavior that we associate with cognitive capabilities. And they do them, even such capabilities that we call, for example, invention or creativity. I'm not claiming that machines have them, but I'm claiming that we perceive machines as entities that have these kind of capabilities because of the outcomes of what they do. And I think this is to some extent, this is part of the problem, is that we are facing technology in a role that we have been, that is not just a servant technology. It can provide us with some unique insights. It can give us some inspirations for our own thinking that we haven't been thinking without the access to this kind of cognitive performance that AI enabled system today are giving us. So
I have to stop and move on to the next panelist, unfortunately. I would love to talk to get some insights from Jarosław Królewski and from Mr. Christopher Fredriksson, because both of the gentlemen are running successful companies. And maybe let's start from our Swedish guest. The company that you are running is focusing on intelligently advice on matching consultant with companies. And as you know, you are processing a lot of personal data, right? So information about emails, the mobile numbers, etc., and it's regulated by the frameworks such as GDPR. So what are your thoughts on how this impacts your ability to compete on a global level? Since you as a startup, you have to compete with companies from US, China, Australia, etc.
Yes, thank you. It is an interesting question, and I think firstly, from my personal ground level perspective, we engage with our users, our individual users, with a different model than a lot of other companies hoarding data, whereas our users in a transparent model share data on their competences and traits in return for professional opportunities. So unlike say Facebook, we're not collecting data on our users while entertaining them, but rather the collection is part of the exchange that takes place in the open, which means basically GDPR is not a huge problem for us. Of course, there are other things we could do if it was not around that we just don't consider doing. Now, from the competitive perspective, I assume, or obviously, greater degrees of freedom generally means greater abilities to compete. But frankly, access to data is one important aspect of creating startups. Access to financing is another. access to developers is a third, for example. And when I look at the startup scene that surrounds me, I would say financing is fine, data is somewhat troublesome, developers is very troublesome, and the part of, and with respect to data, there are a lot of very exciting AI companies working outside the personal data sphere, which are, significantly less regulated. So from my perspective, yes, it's a feature of the European market. It's something we need to relate to. But it might make us somewhat less competitive in some spaces, but there are tons of other spaces where AI can be very competitive, which is not about predicting human behaviors and infringing on personal integrity.
Thank you so much. Jarosław, I mean, you managed a very successful AI company called Synerise. You have a very successful track record of a successful cooperation, for example, with Żabka. Żabka is the largest, probably, chain of convenience shops in Poland. So your company, for example, analyzed the sales data, right? Customer behavior when they are using the Żabka app on the mobile. So you process tons of data. And what do you think about the upcoming regulation, and will it help you or not in terms of global cooperation or global competition when you want to compete with companies coming from US, China, or any other region of the world?
Thank you for the question. Before I start, I just want to tell you that I completely disagree that AI is not magic. AI is definitely magic. It can manage the use of chemotherapy drugs and predict the tolerance of chemotherapy drugs. You can just optimize the chemotherapy regime in medicine. You can just use AI for the radiologic things and trying, to train specific model to cure some diseases. AI helps with the, all the problem with the COVID. AI just help, to make a big revolution in agriculture. We are using the AI in each part of our life right now to make the quality of that life much more higher, etc. So from my perspective, definitely AI is magic. I am completely cannot agree that it's like a cold version of the tech which we already observing. This is quite big revolution, and we are seeing that all the time. It impact like the revenues, it impact how companies will compete in the futures, how the economics of different countries looks like in the future. We have whole revolution in the military in terms of the drone analysis, computer vision, etc. It's completely, definitely the magic thing right now. So coming back to your question about the data, yes, we are collecting right now yearly around 200 billions of the transaction. What is really important, of course, we are selling like the B2B software to our customers. So all the data is like belongs to our customers and to the customer, to the end customers of those customers. And every customer should like opt into that, and it can easily opt out of that. But definitely what I believe will be like the trend in the future, it will be like the quite different approach how we manage this data. I think that a lot of people understand what it means to give away some part of the data we have. It is always connected, associated with the quality of the light we have. And I think that most of the companies like Żabka, Carrefour, even like the big tech, understand today that people understand what is all this better about. So I think that everyone wants to educate very deeply the customers about what it means for them when we are trying to use the data for different purposes. And I think that most of the companies try to make and deliver the tips to those customers in some explainable way, why we are using that and what kind of data are impacting some specific results. When we, of course, analyzing the market today, the China and the United States are the leaders in the different fields. One is, of course, like the scientific one. The another one is, of course, pragmatic, where the specific implementation and deployment of models on and the big tech is deep tech is already quite visible. Definitely more even in China rather than in the United States. But what we also see and what we also observe that a lot of companies are working already on the first data approach to the big data revolution. So so it is not only the European problem, because, for example, California is introducing right now almost the same rules like we see in the GDPR, etc. So I think that everything which is quite ethical is already covered by GDPR. I think that everything what is already like the part of this convention is quite good for everyone. Of course, it limits some possibilities of specific, I think so, very advanced like modeling on personal behavior of the humans. But I think that thanks to this kind of revolution, which was done by this regulation, we and the European Union, but also the countries, gave like the people, like the citizen, some great educational materials about how the world looks like today. So from that perspective, it was quite good from my side. Of course, I think that when we try to think about AI right now in terms of the some kind of chase, some kind of discipline, where everyone is fighting about the tech and the intellectual property. This kind of the tech is not always like the scaling with the money, and not always is scaling with the data you have. There is a lot of synthetic data approaches. There is like the cold start problems which we need to solve. So I think that this is a lot of different segment of this discipline, which could be like the support by European companies, that we have quite many possibilities to show our power in terms of the intellect, etc.
Thank you. I mean, from my perspective, I think the AI could be treated like nuclear energy. I mean, you could create a bomb, but on the other side, you could create a company which is offering electricity to consumers. So, in terms of nuclear bombs or that kind of topic, then we have a ban to not proliferate or not develop the AI bomb, the nuclear bombs. So my question would be, shouldn't there be some kind of international agreement to ban, or let's say to stop developing lethal AI, or stop the development of AI which could be used in the military? Something along the lines of banning development of nuclear bombs. Because maybe that's also such a huge development for humanity that if we'll not stop this, then like I said, China, US, and maybe other powers will develop such a lethal AI that it could kill actually humanity. So my question would be toward Damian, who runs the Gaia Foundation, who's focusing on the development of responsible AI. What's your take on building this humanoid or putting AI inside robots, which could be put on the war zone?
Hello, thank you. Actually, when I was hearing your speeches and what you actually said, especially Mr. Boris, when he was talking about the societies and the changes in the development throughout the years, I remembered myself when I was young and I need to do my homework and I need to go to the library to buy or to rent some books in order to do it. And now actually I'm putting 3 words in some AI program and is doing some essays instead of me. We strongly appreciate the new technologies, and undeniably they enable us to develop on an enormous scale. And this is just the beginning. We know that everything is going to be much more digital in the future. But the greatest challenge from our point of view, is to put the humanity in the center of the technology progress. We observe many companies that put the security, freedom, or privacy in favor of their profits. For example, in the United States, regulations of AI and so on. We for sure, as Europeans, are not going to be the best and the fastest in that space. But for sure, our AI is going to be the most quality one, the most human-centered, so that we can somehow trust that those kind of systems in the future. Because irresponsible and unsustainable development leads to have a greater differences in the society that actually we can see around us every day. Because we are, thanks to that rapid development, we are going to exclude some kind of society, social groups from the society. We appreciate that we have or we will have the vehicles without the drivers. But the question is, if we are going to produce so many artificial intelligence companies which are going to replace humans in it, who is going actually to take care of that kind of transmission? Because, for example, my parents, they born and they raised where there was no even a computer in their life. And now the computer is absolutely everywhere. And how to put the efforts on those people who are going to lose, because they are going to lose the jobs, and even more jobs is going to be created. But I'm just asking about the transition. Is the companies that produce those kind of developments are going to also to take the responsibilities of the transmission of the skills and the people from one side to the another, not to exclude them? Because that actually is going to make some kind of tensions in the society. And we have many problems already with the society and around us. But if we are going to cover those problems and not to see them as before we do, we are going to have more and more problems, not only on the local scale, but also on the global scale.
Thank you. I mean, I'm not aware of a sector where a company has suffered the consequences of its action. I mean, if their product doesn't kill, like let's say cigarettes, for example, I find it hard to imagine that the Facebook will be paying or somebody else will be paying for a disruption on the labor market. Frankly speaking, but I do agree. I think we all agree that upskilling, reskilling is probably one of the most important part for the governments, because much more jobs will be created. That's the current trends that we see. Or current research that are coming from, for example, from World Economic Forum, from McKinsey, many leading consulting companies, that more jobs will be created, but in different part of the sector. And I fully agree that the crucial part is the transition, how to help those people from one sector to move to the other sector. For example, we are missing amazing tons of people in the healthcare sector. So why not move those people to a healthcare sector and shorten the lines, the queues to the doctors and to the hospitals? But let's move on from the topic of responsible AI, of the topic of regulation, to much closer to startups and to business. So maybe let's start with the view of the current pace of AI adoption in European industry, and what are the developments on the Swedish market? And can we hear that from Mr. Johan Harvard? Could you share your thoughts on the development?
Definitely, yeah. So we at Combiant, we're working with 32 of Sweden's and Finland's largest companies. So we, in total, our network has something like 800,000 employees, with companies like Scania, Ericsson, H&M, Electrolux, Atlas Copco, and many more. We're working with them to really accelerate their transformation, and obviously AI is a core part of that. on the pace of adoption, I would say that it is picking up pace. I mean, I think we have passed through the first hype phase of AI in organizations. So they first jumped into it and thought about like, hey, okay, let's implement AI and get that magic stuff going. But then obviously you have the backlash where you realize that, wow, it's pretty hard to really get those big benefits from AI when you have built an organization that for 100 years that is not set up for that. Highly decentralized, where you have allowed a lot of decision making on local level and so on. So now taking that company that's 100 years old, 40,000 employees, and really leveraging the value of AI, that's really hard. So I think one of the biggest barriers and challenges now is really to realize the potential value from AI, because that is difficult in organizations, and in particular in large organizations. So it's taking a lot of time, but it's really going in a good direction. I mean, looking at the AI, and I think AI as well has encouraged CEOs and senior decision makers to take also some bigger investments in their underlying infrastructure, because they see that, okay, we need to modernize our IT infrastructure to be able to put these make these nice use cases come alive. Otherwise, we don't have a chance of getting value from this data. So it is like the spearhead, tip of the spear is pulling the entire pyramid of organizations forward with AI. So I think that is great. Maturity is increasing, I think the organizational maturity is improving as well. Previously, organizations had a small team, perhaps of some PhDs with mathematical statistics to try and do AI, but that many times that failed because they failed to understand the real business cases out there in the field. But now more and more companies are waking up to that and looking at how can we empower people more at the front lines that are closer to the customers where the business is made, and put AI in the hands of them to really solve real challenges. And I think that is really helping scale the use of AI. I think also another big breakthrough has been confidence in not doing it yourself, and not also working only with the big players. There's many small startups coming out there that have niche solutions that might be just the right fit for your organization, the challenge that you are having. And your best bet is probably to work with them, not invent the wheel again if there's a good wheel out there, but find a way to work with them, even if it's 3 people out of Warsaw somewhere that might have the right solution for you. You might need to change your sourcing and procurement rules to be able to work with that kind of small supplier. More and more organizations are doing that, picking up speed, definitely.
Thank you. Maybe I could still ask you, about the data sharing models, and actually that will be the question also to other panelists. Did you manage to build any common data sharing infrastructure? Because as you know, everyone is talking about data. Data is the new oil. The data is the new air. There are many other that kind of sentence which are mentioned on the conferences. And but when I come to the data sharing, and when I approach several biggest corporations in Poland, but also international corporation, they are saying, no, that's my data. I want to develop, for example, autonomous car by BMW or whatever, and that's my data because I'm gonna build a product by myself, right? I'm the producer of that car, so I want to have this data, and because of that data, I could develop autonomous vehicle, for example. But on the other side, the startups are saying, we need this data, we can't compete with the biggest one, so let's start sharing data. Government is also thinking about building some common, I would say, or shared infrastructure for data sharing. And it's very hard to convince business, but maybe we could start from public sector, for example, sharing healthcare data, which will be, of course, anonymized in the first place, right? To develop, for example, a new cure for cancer, or to speed up the USG, or that kind of stuff. So what's your view in Sweden? Have you managed to build the data sharing infrastructure, and did you convince those 32, as I believe, companies to share the data within Combient Group? Because as I understand, they both together create the Combient Group.
That's a good question, and I think it's really a complicated area, because data is definitely not like oil. Data does not have a value. You can just throw data in a machine and put fire on it and get energy. Data only has value if it's useful for something, useful to inform your decision making that can have an impact on what kind of value you're creating. And I think there's a lot of confusion and challenges around data. And so many companies have heard this: data is new oil, so let's collect as much as we can of it. And then we have companies collecting tons of data, not using it for anything. It's just sitting there, and they're like, "Can someone help us find value here? We don't think we can't find anything." So not all data is valuable, and often, obviously, to get value from the data, many times you need to cross-link and interconnect the data. A data set might not be valuable on its own, but if you connect the temperature data with the RPM data from the machines, with the logistics data and so on, maybe then you can get a view of how a factory is working and how you can make improvements. So you need to connect data, sometimes between companies, obviously, but that's obviously also sensitive, since all the companies have heard this, that data is the new oil, it's the new gold, so we can't share this. And obviously also, data is not really protected by intellectual property law. Data is not like a thing that you can put a patent on or a simple contract on as well. When you have leaked the data, when someone has touched your data, they can quite easily just go on and keep that data. It's difficult to have like legal measures against them and so on. You might be able to sue them, but I think companies are being cautious, avoiding to share the data. I would say the more mature companies are thinking about how to segment the data. And one company the other day said that they're thinking about an onion approach in their company, that in the core of the onion, we have really business critical data. We will not share that with anyone. It's really important. But the outer layers, we might be able to share when we see that there is value from sharing, and we don't risk too much by sharing it. So it is moving along. I mean, looking at some regulatory proposals now from the EU, that the European Commission wants to force companies to share data. I think that can be quite problematic, and that could create some perverse effects on the market as well. Like, so if they are fearing that this data in the hands of competitors could be problematic, will they stop collecting it? Will they find ways of obscuring it and so on? So I think we should be very cautious in forcing companies to share data, but definitely simplify data sharing and so on, and trying to find these common benefits from shared data and commonly enriched data.
Thank you. Boris, you are advising on digital transformation, but also in terms of AI. And as we know, as was mentioned also by Johan, I fully agree, data is not an asset. I'm talking about the financial asset. Now has a financial value, so it doesn't exist on company balance sheets. And when I talk with lawyers and accountants from EY, both of them mentioned that there is no field in the balance sheet where you could find data. But nevertheless, data has some value. I mean, from business perspective. So and you are also advising the company called VersaBox, which is developing robotics in Industry 4.0. So what's your take on sharing data within the factory, for example, or within other companies who build the whole supply chain? Because the concept of Industry 4.0 is a concept where one company is passing some data and some information to the other party within the supply chain, and automatically, for example, make some orders, establish pricing, etc. So what is happening currently in the Industry 4.0, and what you are doing as a VersaBox?
What we see today is it's obviously industrial companies are cautious about sharing their data, about opening them, and I think there's a mix of interest here. On one hand, they are actually trying to approach this problem, for example, through initiatives like standardizing the interfaces to machines on the shop floor. As we are currently participating in standardizing initiative that has been defined by the German automotive industry. It's called VDA 5050, and basically the aim is to actually be able to manage, to govern fleets of material handling equipment, autonomous material handling equipment coming from different vendors. So that's one approach, and it's usually API oriented rather than data oriented. Obviously, we see a potential, for example, because where our robots are present, they usually, for example, have a very current map of the shop floor environment. And we believe this might be a useful asset for the factory. And I don't think that we will have any kind of reservation of sharing this kind of data, except for, well, we don't have, there are no defined standards for this kind of assets that would enable other applications, like, for example, security systems, to make use of this information. So basically, we have lots of standards. We have some reservations which are so that the data sharing is replaced, for example, by API-oriented initiatives. But also, as you said about the value of the data, actually the data is quite valuable, for example, for the equipment manufacturing companies. So why we have been in a number of initiatives that were supposed to deliver an extensive preventive maintenance capability for the factories, and which have been basically destroyed by the vendors that wouldn't even share not just the data, because the data that is coming over standard industrial protocols, it's relatively easy to spoof. But the problem is that we don't have the meta models for the data. So we understand the data, we know the data, but we don't understand that. So basically, that's one of the reasons also why there are not so many vendors who would be happy to actually share the data that would put them to some extent out of their maintenance business, because the control goes to a customer that has a better insight of when and if, for example, some parts should be changed in the machines so that they continue operating flawlessly. Yes, so basically there is this. We also feel that that generally the industry is also quite reluctant to adopt any kind of cloud-based infrastructure models. There are some who do, but most of them are reluctant. And I think this is also an important barrier for the data sharing, because it's not basically, maybe it's not the fundamental first step, but it really enables data sharing when you try to migrate from very much proprietary in-house, in-shop floor infrastructure for your systems to cloud-based or multi-cloud-based environment.
Okay, thank you. I mean, my last question, since we are about to finish the webinar, would be about cooperation between Poland and Sweden. Both countries developed their AI policy. Sweden, I believe, in 2017 or 2018, commissioned a creation of AI policy. There were several initiatives. One of them was to establish, for example, the Novak institution, which conducted, for example, research. So, for example, there was, government invested 40 million Swedish koron in several universities to help train AI professionals. So the same action was also done by Polish government, which supported the development of many AI professionals in Poland. So I believe we have some common goals or some common initiative, like, you know, helping AI professionals, so opening up the data, public data for AI algorithms. But my question would be in terms of responsible AI, since we have, for example, Damian here, and in terms of startup corporation, how those two countries could cooperate, so we could speed up the AI development in Europe. Maybe let's start from Damian, since you have some probably interesting insight from responsible AI part.
As a field of cooperation with Sweden, we strongly looking forward to join kind of research teams in order to work on common definitions compassion, of reliable AI about any kind of things which also are connected with the future actions, because let's say in our area, the Baltic Sea region, we have many problems around us. We have the brain drain of young people from this let's say South Baltic countries. We have the pollution in the Baltic Sea region. So all of those kind of small, let's say, local and global problems we see as a kind of ground for the new developments of the research, and then as a products for that. Because only when we will just focus on those kind of human problems, we will see the benefit of developing that kind of networks or just that kind of products as we see it.
Jarosław, since you're running the Sunrise company, very successful one, how you think the Swedish and Polish companies could cooperate, or maybe institution, how you could build scale together with Sweden?
I think that definitely in the world and everything should be reshaped, both like the social sciences and something like this. On the national level, we should think about some shared like educational programs, and also getting some insights from experience for both countries, because this is really something very important. You know, the investment in that field, in the education on every level, from the kindergartens to the innovative program studies, it will impact whole different aspects of the European Union, and also the position of those countries in the world. So this should be like the focus of both countries. But also, I think that a lot of companies should also support some great initiatives which are quite connected to the AI, and to trying to build a lot of amazing pragmatic programs as well. But what I think that it should be done, as my colleagues said before, I think that all the research programs which could be like the shared, where we can just put some open source ideas to accelerate cooperation between different countries will be great. I think that every country has specific way of managing the problems and just delivering the solutions. So trying to exchange such knowledge will be something which will be very crucial. And what is really important for me and for my company, but also I think that this is the trend right now in the world, is trying to make AI much more based on the metrics and performance. We every company right now, every organization is already trying to set that that they are deploying the AI, implementing AI on a different level. Unfortunately, sometimes it's very poor algorithms, poor models, like very common one, without the impact on different fields of interest. So what I think that we should to build some great metric, which could be like something like standard for specific segments of the market, like the retail, banking, insurance, where we can just compare what we achieve in specific field. And from my perspective, I think that when we think about European Europe, by the way, we should think about how we protect and how we should protect the intellectual property of companies which are in this place of the world, because definitely it will impact our position in the world, and this is something which is I think so quite big problem on the mental level, but also intellectual one, because this is not like the similar how it looks like, for example, in the United States, where you can just patent almost everything and be the leader of the different economies. So this is something which we think should be done in future.
Great, thank you. I mean, we are also in the Q&A session. So if somebody from the audience have a question, that you could raise it through the tool within the Zoom. We will see that in our Q&A tool. So we'll try to answer the question. But in the meantime, maybe I would love to hear some thoughts on the ideas how we could cooperate from Johan, since you are the director at the Combient, who cooperates so much with so many Swedish corporations. So what's your thought on the cooperation between Poland and Sweden?
Definitely, yeah. We're doing a lot of cooperation projects in different ways, and obviously cooperation is hard because working with many parties is difficult. So I think cooperation should really be done only when you see that there's mutual benefit from it, and only when you really want to do it. So pick your cooperation projects with care and don't cooperate all the time everywhere, because that will drain your resources. But one thing that I think could be interesting and could be important, where maybe Poland and Sweden could do a joint drive, is in the area of how then to implement this AI Act. I think it's only a matter of time. It's going to be a couple of years, and then your EU will have implemented the AI Act. It's only a matter of how it will look, the specific formulations and so on. I think it will come into place. But what I'm worried about is the gray zone and uncertainty before the definitions have been tried in court. How can the oversight authorities understand AI? How can they do inspections and look at algorithms and understand how much explainability is sufficient explainability? So it would be really interesting if we could start already now, and Sweden and Poland could be the lead, and maybe join in with some other member states from EU as well, and look at how the heck, how can we do smart oversight of this and understand AI for what it is. It is intelligent, or it's sophisticated machinery being put in place and used in different contexts. How do we make the right assessments of what is high risk and not just label everything high risk to be on the safe side? So to developing that competency so that we can have smart regulatory applied, and smart regulatory compliance and audits applied, and not just silly regulatory oversight done where the regulators don't actually understand what they are regulating. So that could be an important area to put some effort into, I think, for the coming years.
Thank you. Any remarks from Mr. Christopher Fredriksson in terms of cooperation, how we could cooperate, or maybe what's the area where should we cooperate?
Frankly, I feel very humbled by the company on this panel in terms of insight into these bilateral discussions. I think, first of all, my company is very Swedish in terms of its current market coverage. And secondly, the problems we are running into are more on a local level, where I don't have the insight on what the Polish situation looks like. But I think, speaking generally, or at least attempting to speak generally, I would say, I think, great point from Johan on predictable legal environment. If we're speaking about startups and whether to start a company or not, investing maybe a decade of your life, ignorance of what the future is going to look like and how your idea is going to be regulated or forbidden is, of course, something of a showstopper, or at least a demotivator. And again, a final remark that I touched upon earlier, I think Sweden, the Swedish business landscape, specifically the startup landscape, is plagued by a talent shortage in developer capacity. I think we have we have a lot to offer the world, or the talents of the world in this space in terms of standard of living, quality of living, and we probably could do a lot more to attract stellar talent in this field from other places around the planet. But currently, that is definitely something holding us back.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, for example, the thing that GLOAS, I'm talking about the Digital Poland Foundation with several other organizations from Europe, including the one from Sweden, because there is an organization sponsored by the Wallenberg Foundation, which is organizing the Digitalidag, which promotes digitalization and promotes digital skills. The thing that glows us is the digital skills. I mean, we are all missing the talents. We are all missing competences, digital competences. But like I think it was said previously by Damian, we are in a transition period. So I think we need to really put some effort to the upskilling or reskilling of the society and move them to other sectors, for example, also to become, they don't have to become a programmer or developer, but I think there are many other job openings within the IT sector. You know, you could be a project manager, you could be a designer, a UX designer, etc. You could be a tester. So there are many, so many roles in IT world or IT sector, ICT sector, that I truly believe we need to put a lot of effort in terms of upskilling or reskilling. We have some. We don't have any question at the moment, so I think we could finish the webinar, I would say, on time. So I don't know if maybe Ms. Ambassador want to say something at the end. My question would be.
I just want to express my gratitude for your participation, and I hope that this is the beginning of our cooperation and between you. So, and thank you very much, and hope to see you. And because we will do some homework, so we would like to also organize other panels related to the IT and innovative sectors. So hope to see you, some of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will also thank the ambassador, the Embassy of Poland, for organizing the event, and of course the distinguished speakers and panelists for joining us and sharing the thoughts, the insight. I also thank the audience, so the listeners who are patient to listen to such a complicated, I would say, discussion about artificial intelligence. So I wish you a good afternoon and hear you soon. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.